Hi again. Here we are to continue talking about React Native and state. Okay, so in the last video, we created a component that just is a simple timer. You know, it's just counting the seconds. The run and pause button is not doing anything for us yet, but let's try and get this run pause button to start and stop our timer. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to my code here. We've got a little warning here. I think it's because we can't call start timer here until the component actually is mounted. You know, because we're calling it from the constructor, but that is actually happens before the component actually gets created and mounted. There's another method here, component will mount. So, you know, when a component is about to be removed, we call component will unmount, and we can also call component will mount. Okay, so this is when the component is about to be displayed on the screen, and we could actually call this dot start timer, and that might, I'm not sure, but I think that might get rid of this error here. Let's give it a try. I'll refresh that. Oh, there we go. Right, so that did get rid of that warning. In the end, we're actually not going to do this because we're going to use the button to start and stop our timer, right? And why don't we do that right now? So here we go. We've got our timer. It's running, but what we want to do is we want to, when the button says run, we want to tap it, stop the timer, or start the timer running, and then the button will say pause, and then when we tap pause, the timer will stop. Okay, so, or pause, right? So let's find the on button press method here, right? So here we're changing the state of the button from on to not on, right? So why don't we also add in a statement here and say like, hey, you know, if actually, why don't we use that kind of single line you know, if statement here. That'll be fun, right? So what we'll do is we'll say this dot state dot on. So now this is before we change the state here. Okay, so if the state was, if this was false, then we're going to make it true, and that means the timer should be running. So if that was false, then we should, I'll put it here, we should start the timer. Okay, right, so actually this would be this dot start timer. And if it's true, so the timer is running, we're going to actually switch it on the next line to false to make the timer stop. So right here, we should pause our timer, right? And we've got a method for that called pause timer there. So what we'll do is we'll say this dot pause timer, right? So we've got start timer up here. This sets the state to true, right? Shoot, I already did that. So actually, why don't we you know, take this out of here? Like, we don't need to set state twice, right? So we'll say this dot state dot on, you know, and if it's on, that means true. We're going to pause the timer in that case, so we'll call it pause timer. If it's not true, if this is false, then we'll call this dot start timer to start the timer. And when we call start timer, the timer will get set to true. Okay. When we call pause timer, we're going to clear the timer to stop the timer from running. But also, maybe we should do this thing here where we set state, right? So why don't we do this? Why don't we say this dot set state, and what we'll set is we'll set the on property to false. Okay, so this says like, hey, on is false, the timer is not on. Let's clear the interval that is actually making the timer update here, and then that should stop the counting, right? So let's save that and give it a test now. So we've got our button set up. Let's go back here and refresh. So there's our timer, it's running. Let's click pause there. That should stop it. I'll click here, that should run it again. Yeah, and there we go, right? So I'll tap here, it should say run, so that should be paused. Right? When I tap run, then it should start running, right? So that's pretty good. It's kind of running when we start, and I guess that's because we've got the timer saying paused anyway, right? And that's because, you know, we're calling this .start timer on component will mount. So if the timer is supposed to run right when we load our component, then this would be good. But I kind of think that maybe the timer should be paused when we load up the component. So I'm gonna put the slashes here, and comment out this line so that we don't start the timer here, right? And then I'll go back to my simulator and I'll refresh it, and you can see it says run. So if we tap that, it should start running, right? And there we go, right? So that doesn't look too bad. Let's pause it. So that looks pretty good. So I think we're doing well here, right? We've got our constructor, we've got our props, we set our state. Our state has 2 values. If we change the values, then the component re-renders. And in our case, if we change the on property, then we re-render and we draw the state of the button here, right? So the state of the button is either on or off. And then the time here also, if this changes on an update, right, we change the time there, then we also re-render and we draw the time here into the button. Okay, so thanks for watching, and in the next video maybe we'll start formatting this and then kind of clean up our timer code and make it like a little more robust. Okay, so thanks for watching.